The other by the police themselves.
We have two live reports from Milwaukee, beginning with Channel 5's Phil Walters. Phil?
A remarkable vote just now, Warner, by the police officers of Milwaukee against their chief. 92% of the union officers rating their chief's job performance as unacceptable, and nearly 94% saying they have no confidence in his ability to lead.
Based on these figures, I request that the chief of police of the city of Milwaukee resign from this position and allow someone more competent to run the department.
The chief did not even wait for the results before responding, saying it was a foregone conclusion.
It will not affect my dedication and zeal to serve this city and this department.
But without the support of officers on the street, their union spokesmen say, the chief cannot lead. There will be pressure to force him out. And today, the fight within the ranks became a national fight. The police union's international president flew in from Washington, saying he's ready to use the political power of police organizations around the country to oust the chief.
No one told the police that we had a convicted paroled child molester living in that home. I think the police should have known that, and I think there should be public outrage about that, not about the fact that three seasoned officers made a decision that they now have to suffer the consequences of.
The union officers feel the chief, looking for a scapegoat, sacrificed three officers who failed to rescue a 14-year-old boy trying to flee Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. Those officers have made no statements, but their union lawyer has been with them.
They'd suffer the torture of the damned because the first thing is they would say, and I knew it, but is there something I should have seen, should have observed, should have concluded that would have triggered me into arresting this person, in which case there would be 5 or 6 more young men alive. That they're going to torture themselves with, regardless of what Areola does.
And the chief made their agony worse, he says, by prejudging the officers. The chief denies any prejudgment and expresses sympathy.
You know, when we talk about victims of Jeffrey Dahmer, they're not only the individuals that were slain by him personally. I consider the officers who were involved as victims. The city has now been victimized by it.
And the question tonight, will the chief himself also become a victim? All this at a time that the chief and the mayor are appointing community panels and reaching out to experts to help heal this community. The Reverend Jesse Jackson is in town, and reporter Charlie Wojciechowski is with him.
Charlie? Right now we're in front of the Oxford Apartments where Jesse Jackson is working the crowd. We are told he has just been talking to one of the mothers of the victims. He is in Milwaukee today to try to establish a sense of reconciliation and peace in the wake of the Jeffrey Dahmer killings. He's coming up here right now. Yes, Reverend Jackson, if we can speak to you, we're live on the air in Chicago right now. Let me help you up here. Thanks for joining us, the Reverend. Reverend. Excuse me, Reverend. We should do a little handshaking here first. The Reverend started his day earlier in Milwaukee down at the Hyatt Hotel. We'll take a look at that tape now. The Reverend Jackson arrived in Milwaukee with a busy agenda. The top priority, restore a sense of community to a city divided by the crimes linked to Jeffrey Dahmer. First, he led a group of ministers gathered for an African-American leadership conference in prayer. Then, he renewed his call for an independent investigation into how Milwaukee police officers could have returned a 14-year-old boy to Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment.
The Justice Department has a role to play in this as well, and their investigation must be thorough and prompt, so as to give people a sense of their presence and commitment to fair results in this horrendous situation. But also the needs that have been unmet for so long must also be addressed.
From the leadership conference, it was off to City Hall and a meeting with Milwaukee Mayor John Norquist. Jackson said his message was one of reconciliation.
Our concern now must be to review this ugly situation and to seek some sense of redemption and reconciliation and renewal.
Okay, I'm joined now by Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend, what can you do here in Milwaukee to try to heal some of these wounds?
Well, first of all, the people need to feel that people beyond here care for them, but they're still in a kind of chamber, a kind of vacuum violence. I just met with people who lived here who had to leave because they had been threatened. Somehow that anger has been transferred from Dahmer on to the people who have lived in this building, so that now they're living in fear. The suggestion is that something that they did or did not do created the crisis, and so meeting with them is a factor. A second factor is trying to raise some resources to bury the remains of the dead with some degree of dignity. But then there are deeper problems here relative to community relations, the gap between, say, inner city schools and suburban youth, 6,000 versus 12,000. Unemployment for blacks 3 and 4 times higher. So they must somehow seize the moment to try to deal with the Dahmer situation, with the deeper levels of distrust that plagues this community.
Speaking about the distrust, Reverend Jackson, today the Milwaukee Police Union had a vote of no confidence for Chief Areola. Can we get your comment on
It
that?
seems this is no time for the police department to engage in some kind of mutiny against its chief. Either the chief can move decisively and maintain some semblance of trust here, or I can do as Gates did in Los Angeles and drag it out and create an even deeper problem. And so if the police department is willing to engage in mutiny against its chief, it does implicate that police department as being out of hand and with a real need for discipline and loyalty.
Reverend Jackson, this is Warner Saunders. May I just ask you a couple of questions? One, what are you going to tell the families of the victims there? And number two, knowing that you have been in sympathy with unions all along, will you be in support of the police union or will you be in support of the chief?
Well, I'm in support of a quick remedy, and the police who were indifferent are as guilty here as those who were violent and aggressive in Los Angeles. The police department must fight for its integrity. Its job to protect and serve should be honored, but any negligence from that duty must be reprimanded and must happen rather quickly. As I speak with people, I can only say to them that they must turn to each other and not on each other, and not begin to drink and move toward drugs as anesthesia for their pain. They must turn to each other and not on each other, and use each other as a kind of group therapy sounding board for each other.
Thanks very much, Reverend Jackson. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We also still have Phil Walters with us. And Phil, one thing that I wanted to ask you, the situation in Los Angeles comes to mind where a police chief under fire, the troops rallied around him. Was there previous ill will in Milwaukee between the officers and this police chief?
They now refer to past problems. Of course, being a Chicago reporter and not having spent a great deal of time, I'm not familiar with them. There's also been some feeling that he's a very capable man at handling the department, but he has gotten caught up in politics, that he is somehow being run by the mayor, aligned with the mayor. And I think the pulling and the tugging in so many different directions at once, we now begin to see how deep this problem is and how long it may go on. Here you have the people angry at police, you have the police officers angry and distrustful, as the Reverend Jackson would say, of their own chief. It's not going to be easy to get out of this one. It's going to take this city a very long time, and I don't know how much good the outside counsel and help will be. It seems to be an internal problem.
Thanks very much, Phil Walters and Charlie Wojciechowski, live from Milwaukee.
And later on in this broadcast, how state officials may have provided Jeffrey Dahmer with the drugs he allegedly used on his victims. We'll have an exclusive report from our Unit 5's Peter Carl.